everyone. Welcome to NASCA TV. We're excited to have you all with us this afternoon. As you're dialing in, please take a moment to rename yourself and include your state or company name so that we know who's with us today. If you have a second, also drop your information into the chat. We'd love for you on the call to connect with each other, and we'd love to connect with you from NASCA as well. Again, welcome into today's conversation, another edition of a National Emerging Issues webinar on green energy opportunities. I'm Kathleen Kelly, the research manager here at NASCA. We are thrilled to have you all with us today to have a conversation around this important issue for state governments. I'm joined today by a distinguished panel who will be with us sharing their expertise and thought leadership. Before we start, a few reminders. Today's webinar is being recorded and it will be available in NASCA's Knowledge Center in just a few days. During today's webinar as well, we'd love for you to submit questions and any comments in our chat. All right, we're going to start things off with a few poll questions, just to see where you all at with green energy opportunities. So Tammy, if you could please launch the first poll question, that would be great. All right, there it is. So we'd love for you to take a second and respond to this. How is your state implementing green sustainable solutions? So this is a multiple choice question. So if you have an opportunity to select multiple answers here, is your state or company implementing green purchasing or environmentally preferable purchasing through established efficiency standards for equipment, processes, and buildings, with energy management, through use of renewable energy systems, with LEED certification efforts with buildings, or in other ways? Give a couple more seconds for folks seeing some answers come through. All right. A bunch of everything. Definitely green purchasing is in the lead here. We got 38%. Efficiency standards up about 15%. Energy management is a close second with 23%. Use of renewable energy systems. So it's a pretty good mix here. So it looks like folks are doing a number of things. All right, great. Tammy, if you could please launch the second question. Okay, what are your concerns regarding green, clean, and renewable energy? Again, this is another multiple choice. So select all that apply. We've got supply chain issues. Is it funding and costs, infrastructure concerns, technical challenges, or are you not sure what solutions and options are best? Give folks a couple more seconds here. All right. It's looking like we've got funding or costs in the lead, and then followed by supply chain issues. On our last webinar with electric vehicles, that's what we were seeing as well. There's also a lot of infrastructure concerns, and some technical challenges. And then just a few folks are saying, I'm not sure what solutions or options are best. Again, these two poll questions, these are responses that we'll touch upon in our conversation later today. So really appreciate all of your answers with this. All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Tammy. We're thrilled to have you today for NASCA TV. NASCA TV is an ongoing opportunity to meet with thought leaders who are members of NASCA and engage with our state leaders and corporate partners to address emerging issues affecting state governments. We're excited to dig into today's conversation. First, I would like to introduce to you our wonderful lineup of panelists who are with us today. We have Marcus Grubbs, who's the director of the Office of Sustainability, Department of Administration in the state of Minnesota. We have Maurice Perigo, the Deputy Director and Chief Operations Officer of the Washington State Department of Enterprise Services. Dr. Travis Cruz, the Senior Director, Safety and Sustainability Solutions Strategy at Grainger. And Frederick Morris, the Director at KPMG in Infrastructure, Capital Projects, and Climate Advisory. All right, we're excited to have all of our panelists with us today. Thank you all again for joining us. Today's NASCA TV Emerging Issues webinar is around green energy opportunities. The use of green, clean, and renewable energy is a very timely topic, as efforts to reduce our carbon footprints have only increased in the last couple of years. State governments play a big part in that. renewable energy policies help drive the nation's $64 billion market for wind, solar, and other renewable energy sources. These policies play an integral role in states' efforts to diversify their energy mix, promote economic development, and reduce emissions. Roughly half of the growth in U.S. renewable energy generation since the beginning of the 2000s can be attributed to state renewable energy requirements. Overall sustainability with green, renewable, and clean energy can also come in the form of green purchasing, more energy efficient buildings, and specific state policies. Today, we will discuss sustainability with green energy through green sustainable solutions. Our panelists will present their responses to these considerations of green purchasing, energy efficient buildings, and policies that enhance and utilize green, clean, and renewable energy. Before we get into the conversation, I'd like to first ask our panelists to introduce themselves and give an overview of their areas of responsibility in their respective state or company. Marcus, we'll have you start us off, please. Unfortunately, I don't think we can hear you.
What about this?
Now we can hear you.
Sorry about that. Everything was
no worries.
smooth until I arrived. My name is Marcus Grubbs. I'm with the Office of Enterprise Sustainability at the Department of Administration in the state of Minnesota. So our office focuses on providing 3 areas of work: reporting and tracking around sustainability, technical assistance and planning in sustainability, and helping agencies resource sustainability work. And so we have 6 goals for all of the state agencies at the state of Minnesota, and those 6 goals can be found at sustainability.mn.gov. I'll put the link in the chat. And we, try to provide resources for agencies to move those goals forward.
Great, thank you very much. All right, next up we have Maurice.
Yeah, hello everyone. My name is Maurice Perigo. I'm the Deputy Director and Chief Operations Officer at the Washington State Department of Enterprise Services. Our mission at DES is to strengthen the business of government. And we do so by providing a variety of support services to other government entities, statewide and at the local level. Some of the programs that are within my area of responsibility are public works, design and construction, buildings and grounds maintenance, the energy services program, vehicle fleet operations. I also oversee property management, real estate services, and the state capitol campus planning and project delivery teams. So among others, we also oversee contracts and purchasing and enterprise risk and torts and litigations and do a whole bunch of other things. But obviously for our talk today, my focus is on the areas that influence and administer the state's sustainability efforts.
Great, thank you. Certainly keeping you busy over there.
For sure.
All right, Travis.
Great. Good afternoon, Kathleen, and the rest of the folks here on the call. My name is Travis Cruz, and I lead the Safety and Sustainability Solution Strategy for Granger based out of Lake Forest, Illinois. I'm actually today coming to you live from Houston, where all 3,000 members of our sales force are actually receiving training on sustainability solutions so they can bring it to the marketplace to help customers just like you. Really happy to be here. Looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you. And Frederick.
Good afternoon, Fred Morris. I'm a director in KPMG's Infrastructure, Capital Projects, and Climate Advisory Practice. KPMG traces its history back to 1897, and we are a multidisciplinary financial services firm providing advice across industries. I'm a part of our energy infrastructure team, focusing on providing clients advice in the state, local government space, higher ed, corporate clients on all of their energy infrastructure needs. And typically we work across the life cycle of projects, everything from the upfront development of their strategic energy plan, working with them to develop actionable decarbonization strategies, looking at the economics of various technologies, helping them prepare business cases for that approval process, whether it's at the executive level, all the way up to, in some cases, a external board, managing the procurement process and negotiations with service providers, and then finally, working with them to develop a management framework to provide oversight of any third-party contractors or operators. It's great to be with you today.
Thank you, appreciate it. All right, and again, thank you all for being with us on today's webinar. Let's get started with our conversation with a few questions. So my first question is going to be for Marcus. One of the focus areas for the Office of Sustainability is sustainable procurement. To that effort, the sustainability reporting tool was recently launched. Could you tell us more about the sustainability reporting tool and how it assists the state's progress in reaching sustainability goals?
Of course, thank you.
Thank you.
When I introduced myself, I said we had sort of 3 areas of practice in our office. One of those was reporting and tracking. And so the sustainability reporting tool is a tool that we developed with a vendor partner named FigBytes. And this tool allows us to execute our reporting and tracking function. All of our sustainability related data aggregates into this tool. So we've got databases that work our utility data and provide us analysis around energy and water savings. We have a fleet tool that tracks our fleet data and fuel utilization. This tool brings it all together. It does the analytics for us. It's got a dashboarding functionality, and it also does our GHG emissions calculations for us. And then it publishes it to this website, sustainability.mn.gov. And the purpose of that really is, and this was difficult to get everyone to buy into, the purpose of it is to draw attention to areas where we're not meeting goals. So we want to highlight successes that are happening, but we also want to say, hey, X, Y, or Z agency is having a hard time meeting this energy or water goal. And so it draws attention from the public or the legislature to say, this area is in need of funding.
Trying to get my video to work here. There we go. All right. Thank you, Marcus. All right. My next question is for Maurice. Another way that states can utilize green sustainable solutions is through green and energy efficient building, site design, and green building rating systems and credentials such as LEED. Can you tell us more about the state of Washington's efforts in these areas?
Yeah, I'd love to. This is an area where I think we're doing some really great work. Back in 2005, a legislative bill related to high performance green building standards was passed, which now requires state facilities to be designed and built to LEED Silver standard. This has been and continues to be a great measure for sustainability and energy efficiency in building construction. And although LEED Silver is the minimum requirement, many of our projects are reaching gold and platinum status. So LEED Silver certification is actually becoming much easier to achieve because local building codes are actually catching up. They're incorporating higher efficiency standards within their standard permitting processes. And like many other states, they've incorporated these higher standards for sustainability and energy efficiency over the years. It's becoming less of a burden and more of an expectation. And frankly, it's just the right thing to do. In most cases, it pays off in dollars over the years and results in reduced carbon emissions through construction and ongoing facility operations. Washington State's, our DES, our agency has positioned itself really well to be an accessible and effective resource for all government entities. That's kind of what we do. We strengthen the business of government as an agency mission. And we do so in this case through our energy services program, which we reside within our facilities professional services division. It's a collection of engineers, architects, and really smart people that are really moving the agency in the right direction. We offer things like project assistance and consultation for green building workshops, benchmarking and asset management strategies, and oversight services for building commissioning, which is so important to transition from design to construction and then right into operations in an efficient way. We also, our teams also perform research on industry best practices with the intent on influencing sustainable design strategies on public construction projects. And we also have an energy lifecycle cost analysis process that our energy program oversees, which this is required for state facility projects over 5,000 square feet. So this process allows design engineers to provide options to decision makers about where they can make smart investments in energy systems to reduce ongoing costs and reduce carbon emissions. So And the last thing I'll mention is right now is we have an executive order that Governor Inslee signed regarding state efficiency and environmental performance. You know, the order directs state agencies to make purchasing, construction, and leasing decisions that affect our carbon emissions to explicitly consider the benefits and costs of carbon, including the social costs of carbon. You know, the areas of focus in the executive order are zero emission vehicles, new construction, facility rehab projects. It even gets into state ferries, our state ferry system. It talks about clean electricity and even toxics and solid waste reduction. New construction projects are actually required to achieve net zero or zero energy capable certification, which means that they're going to be designed to minimize energy consumption to the point where they can generate enough energy, renewable energy on site to operate the facility over the course of a year. So we have a couple of net zero certified facilities that have been recently constructed and more net zero capable facilities really close to completion. And those net zero capable facilities will likely be pursuing solar energy projects in the future to achieve net zero certification, which will help them effectively zero out their utility bills on an annual basis. So just a couple examples I wanted to share. You know, we constructed a small satellite facility for our Department of Ecology over in Eastern Washington that is net zero certified. You know, to reiterate, it's generating enough energy on site to operate that facility over the course of a year through renewable. We built a childcare facility on the state's capital campus that's also net zero certified. And we're in the process of constructing a public safety laboratory for the Department of Agriculture and Labor and Industries that will achieve net zero capable status. And this is huge because laboratories are typically energy hogs. So they won't get net zero certified on that facility, but they are planning for future solar installations that'll get that project and get that facility to achieve net zero certification status.
Oh, I appreciate your answer. Yeah, the net zero stuff is really neat. I mean, to be able to produce enough of its own energy, that's pretty impressive. So again, thank you very much. I appreciate all the info.
You betcha.
All right. My next question, going over to Travis here. Green purchasing is one way that states can meet green goals of using less energy, using the right kind of energy, and minimizing embodied carbon. How can states ensure that green purchases are not significantly more expensive than a traditional purchase?
Sure. So I realize we're talking about the term green, but really I think we mean sustainability. And at Grainger, I guess the way that we think about sustainability is really the triple bottom line. So we think about it in terms of social, economic, and environmental. From an environmental perspective, it's pretty straightforward. It's energy, air, water, and waste is how we think about the environmental portion. The social aspects, security, public safety, customer safety, labor ethics and compliance, and then the economic side, making sure that customers and businesses stay economically viable. And that's how we think about it. And we know that green purchasing is kind of fits within that realm as well. And I guess I'll provide a few pragmatic examples of how you can think about making sure that green purchases are not significantly more expensive. One simple methodology is a compare and contrast the resource utilization. So for example, using an LED light versus an incandescent bulb, an LED is typically uses 90% less energy than an incandescent and lasts 25 times longer. So that is when you think about organizations who are going through lighting retrofits, that is something that they take into consideration. You think about using clean chemicals like Simple Green, right? Simple Green versus another product that is more toxic or has higher VOCs, but it's pretty much a neutral cost. So in some of those cases, it's very easy to make those decisions. But to go green, organizations really need to think about the life cycle cost, including the disposal associated with products. That's becoming a very big deal is circularity and the life cycle analysis of even MRO products that Grainger produces. So going back to the lighting example, certain lighting contains mercury, right? And upon its disposal, it's considered a hazardous waste, which also incurs a cost. So in many cases, by moving over to LED, for example, not only would you be reducing your hazardous waste generation, you're reducing your cost for disposal as well as energy utilization. So the answer, Kathleen, to that would be taking into consideration life cycle costs, including disposal. Another example might be low flow faucets, right? So faucets these days that can use 1.5 gallons per minute is considered low flow. And obviously that's less water utilization, which is less cost. So doing some of the math behind the return on investment there, it can be very helpful. And organizations like Grainger can help with that, right? We have a huge sales force, and part of their job is to make sure that we're reducing some of that workload from organizations who need to go through that process. Some more sophisticated methodologies that I would share would be some concepts that external consultants might use. So think of the simple payback period. A simple payback is the initial cost divided by the annual savings. When you think about control methodologies or solutions that you might purchase, controls with a payback period that's greater than the expected useful life of the project are not typically recommended, as the cost of the project would not be recovered during the lifespan of the equipment. Another example would be the savings to investment ratio, or SIR. Basically, you take the present value divided by the initial cost. A project is typically only recommended if an SIR is greater than or equal to 1.0, unless otherwise other factors kind of outweigh the benefit. So those are some methodologies that can be applied to make sure that states are not purchasing things that are extensively more expensive. But in this day and age, operationally, many of the products and solutions that are purchased not only have the prices come down, but they come with a resource conservation savings that is fairly intuitive and easier to calculate than, say, what it was 10 years ago.
Sounds good. Appreciate that answer. Thank you, Travis. All right, my next question is for Fred. Securing the funds for green sustainable solutions can be a challenge. Do you have any recommendations on funding opportunities for states that are looking to reduce the upfront costs of green, clean, and renewable energy opportunities?
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm starting to see a lot of interest in the recent legislation that was passed with respect to clean energy financing and funding, specifically the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act provides significant funding opportunities. The infrastructure bill provided over $840 billion in funding, with $75 billion dedicated to clean energy and power projects. The Inflation Reduction Act provided an additional $435 billion in funding, with $4 billion dedicated to sustainability projects and zero emission vehicles. And these are available either through grant programs, loans, tax credits, and rebates. And I highlight tax credits because typically state and local government, that's something that's not traditionally been available to them. But under the IRA, there's now an opportunity to directly receive those credits in the form of a payment from the federal government. So as you think about some of your large building portfolios where you're developing plans around decarbonization, you may be looking at, for instance, clean district energy systems. You may be looking at geothermal technology or on-site renewables, solar thermals, and other types of innovative technologies that reduce energy use, provide either our low carbon or zero carbon fuel sources. Those credits become extremely valuable. They range anywhere from 6% up to 50, 60, even higher in terms of that rebate. And it really depends on several key factors. So it's going to be critical that as you're planning for these projects and you're developing contracts, especially with third parties, that you're ensuring that you understand those requirements to be able to receive those credits. And as they're developing their designs and entering into subcontracts, they're not doing anything that will come back to impact your ability to maximize those credits. For example, domestic content is very important. Where is the equipment being made? There's actually a threshold where a certain percentage of that equipment must be made in the US. There are prevailing wage and apprenticeship requirements. So you need to make sure that your contractor or your third-party service provider is actually following those rules. In addition, there's even a bonus credit for where you locate the facility. For instance, if your building or your portfolios of buildings are located in what's called an energy community, and by that, what the government is defining it as a location where there's either a retired coal mine or a retired coal power plant, for instance, you receive an additional bonus on top of that. So what these really start to add up after a while, some of these projects. One area of uncertainty is that the federal government, in the legislation, there was some ambiguity about the definition of this nonprofit entity. The legislation describes entities that are exempt from federal tax by subtitle A of the code, such as a state or political subdivision, the Tennessee Valley Authority, an Indian tribal government, an Alaska Native Corporation, or a rural electric cooperative. The issue that a lot of some of our clients are running into is around state or political subdivision thereof, because some entities are instrumentalities of the state. And so there's been a lot of pushback to the IRS to clarify the rules around that. So that's something to keep an eye on to ensure that the entity within your state that's looking to take advantage of this is eligible. Higher ed, for example, is a big, we're seeing a big issue there because a lot of higher ed institutions are structured as instrumentalities. So that, like I said, it's something to keep an eye on, but the benefit can be significant with respect to advancing your sustainability objectives.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that answer. It sounds like there is a decent amount of funding out there. So now's the time. Appreciate it. All right. This next question is for all of our panelists. So far, we've mentioned green purchasing and developing and maintaining energy efficient buildings as methods to reduce states' carbon footprint and meet sustainability goals. What are some other recommendations or opportunities that states can utilize? And let's start with Maurice.
All right, thanks. Yeah, there's lots we can do, honestly. But generally, I would encourage states to be bold, really bold with their energy and sustainability policies. Make stretch goals official policy objectives, and offer reasonable exemptions for valid business reasons. Because the challenge in most cases for most agencies to convert their process to a greener and more sustainable way of doing business is not typically a lack of desire to make these bold changes, but rather a mitigating them having the ability to mitigate the operational impact while still meeting their performance expectations. Here's a great example of what I would consider a bold policy here in Washington State. We have an executive order here that requires the state's vehicle fleets to be 75% battery electric by 2030. And 100% of our vehicle fleets to be battery electric by 2035. We're currently somewhere around 5% right now, so we have a long way to go. And much of the pushback that we're getting is that agencies are worried about the impact on their customers. The assumption that staff will effectively have to take 30 minutes or longer out of their day to fully charge an electric vehicle means one less electrical inspection that they get to accomplish during the day, or one less social worker visit, per day. And this has real world impacts, on not only on our productivity, but on the public. And, as public servants, we're hardwired to serve. In many job classes, we're already understaffed with pretty big backlogs. The elevator program, for example, electrical inspection, and this is stuff that keeps the economy going too. So we take our productivity really seriously, and introducing a new process that we haven't fully fleshed out yet, or people may not feel totally comfortable with, is a bit concerning. So now this operational impact of 30 minutes per day may or may not actually happen, but without a stretch goal or a statewide policy to kind of force the issue, most public servants will just default and choose to not mess with their productivity goals, so that they can maintain a high level of service. Maybe change management, as a part of this, organizational change management from an enterprise and the statewide level to help these organizations, understand the impacts a little bit more effectively and mitigate those changes. So I think I would just end with that, is that a bold policy objective like our executive order on state efficiency, environmental performance, on the net zero goals. And the zero emission vehicles, can help establish that expectation for operational changes. We'll also have to incorporate some level of flexibility for agencies to mitigate those impacts as well.
I got you. Yeah, you're talking a whole other webinar right there with change management.
Almost, right?
But thank you very much. I appreciate it. All right, Marcus, you're up next.
Yeah, great. So I am thinking, along some of the same lines that Maurice is. One thing about our effort is it's highly networked at the state of Minnesota. So there's a sustainable purchasing group that exists and has for a long time, and they work on improving the sustainability outcomes of the products we purchase, whether it's our computers being EPEAT certified or reducing the packaging on the products that are coming in. And that's an effort in and of itself. And we network with them and we help and we track and create accountability. But there's also distinct effort in buildings around building new buildings and renovating new buildings to a standard called SB 2030. Well, Sustainable Architecture 2030 would have been the parent of that a long time ago. It predates LEED, and it's like a design performance-based program for making sure buildings are achieving net zero by 2030, our new buildings. And so we sort of stitched together all the things that were already going on and created some kind of cohesive story about it. But also made sure that in areas where we weren't doing things, and particularly, for example, in water conservation, we started building capacity there. And so the very networked nature of what we're doing and the fact that it's not siloed intentionally creates this hopefully long-term culture change around sustainability so that we're engaging everybody in it. And this year, one of my objectives is to make sure we're engaging every single state employee in some kind of basic sustainability messaging. We've done things like all employee lunch and learns, and this year we're going to take it to the next level. And so really think about your culture, because you can have a really great motivational leader that wants to get something done, and that's great for the next 4 years. But think about how the long-term culture will be impacted. I think Maurice is getting at that really well. And then I wanted to say one of the things, the advantages of what we do here is that we're really a lead by example entity. The state operations are an opportunity to lead by example and show to the rest of the sectors of the economy that, look, there's ways to avoid costs and reduce your environmental input. And in most places, that's something that's pretty easy to sell. And that's something that's really, in line with our current administration. And so they can point to us and say, look, we're not just enacting policies that are going to hurt you. These policies are beneficial and we have the numbers, we've done it. So I think that's important to know also, and make sure you're engaging with the business sector in your state and regions so that you're also providing that technical assistance so you get more support from them when it matters. And then I'm also going to, Maurice said, make those stretch goals like your actual goals. I think that's real. That's 100% what needs to happen, and make a plan, because if you don't have a plan, if you don't know, I need $4 million for charging equipment at wherever, even if it sounds crazy and it doesn't sound like you're ready for it, by the time it gets resourced, you all know this, in 3, 4, 5 legislative sessions, it'll be real and you'll need it all. So anyway, that, I think we've got a few examples of that. One of those is a revolving loan fund that we operate for our own buildings. We spent 3 sessions asking for it, and it's a common sense tool, but we dream big and just said, this is what we need. So.
Sounds good. Thank you. I really appreciate that. All right, Fred, you're up next.
Thanks. I think one thing that we're advising our clients to do is to pay careful attention to your long-term objective. So how does your sustainability plan align with your capital planning process and some of your resiliency goals as well. So I always start with a baseline that really considers like, what is your current asset condition? How big is your deferred maintenance backlog? What are the investment requirements for your existing system and your existing buildings, et cetera? And what are your budget constraints, right? So once you understand that, then you can develop a long-term strategy that may involve a series of underlying investments that will support your long-term sustainability goals. And I'll give you an example. We had a client that was interested in decarbonizing or pretty aggressive by 2035. And what they're doing is they're really saying, okay, well, what are those core systems that need to be replaced to address resiliency first? That also help us create a platform to then add on additional low carbon or zero carbon generation. So that's a big investment for them, but it saves them money down the road. It improves resiliency, it addresses sustainability, it creates a platform and is a part of a long-term plan. So you may not have a ribbon cutting ceremony for a new solar PV because it's like pipes buried underground, but it has a really big long-term impact.
I'm starting to see a theme here, thinking towards long-term and making plans now or the future and really making sure your sustainability goals are sustainable. All right, Travis, up to you.
Yeah, so two-part answer for me. So again, repeat the question is, what are other opportunities for states to help reduce their carbon footprint? It's a really good thing that we're talking about carbon, right? So when you think about the greenhouse gas issue, high level, it represents 80% of the problem, followed by 31% roughly with methane, and then you've got nitrous oxide and fluorinated gases. But absolutely, carbon is the beast here. So two simple pragmatic things that everyone on this call could potentially do that's very easy. Leveraging your partnership with Grainger, not a sales pitch, but just a genuine encouraging thing to do that's free. We have the opportunity to generate an environmentally preferred product report that will show you the current spend that you have today with Grainger and the opportunity you have to go green at your choice. And we can also help with the business case analysis to do that. Second point, a lot of organizations don't know where they stand today. They need a baseline assessment to understand the opportunities they have to go after. Grainger has an assessment for energy, air, water, and waste, very low cost to help organizations get going. David Joyce is the senior leader for Grainger who's associated to the NASCA account. He's online here today. He's going to put his email in the chat. And for NASPO, it's Chris Carroll. Those are the two resources within Grainger that folks should be reaching out to conduct EPP reports. We bring that to you, no work on your behalf. So those are two very simple things, Kathleen, that I would suggest. But I'd like to share some alarming statistics that kind of help bring this home to show more pragmatic examples of what people can do. So according to the Lawrence, I'm going to be reading here for a second. According to the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratories and the U.S. Department of Energy, approximately 68% of all energy produced in the U.S. ends up being wasted through various inefficiencies. On top of that, the U.S. Department of Energy, according to the U.S. Department of Energy, HVAC systems use about 35% of buildings' energy on average. That's a lot, right? Just your HVAC system alone. Electric power, out of that 80% greenhouse gas carbon issue, electric power is one of the largest contributors to the generation of CO2 emissions. So if you had to pick and choose where you're going to focus, I would say energy management initiatives and utilization of clean energy and renewable energy. Oh, thanks, Travis. That's very helpful. Well, let me get a little more specific. So HVAC and refrigeration accounts for 35% of a building's utilization of energy, right? So you can do things to prevent. You can purchase clean energy, right? That's the upstream issue, but the downstream is really how things are being utilized within your home, within your house, within your business operations or organization. So once you've purchased clean energy, you still want to prevent heat or cold from escaping the building. You want to make sure you have updated HVAC equipment. You want to make sure you have the proper airflow and filtration. There's a lot of undersized units out there, for example, and operationally, one good step is to go take a look at the HVAC systems within your buildings and your operations to make sure they're efficient. Because remember, 35% of the energy utilization of building is coming from the HVAC system. You think about lighting for a moment. So we all know that LED lighting has been around for a while, but per the US, the Department of Energy, LED lighting will represent 84% of lighting sales by 2030 and reduce energy consumption in the lighting sector by 40%. So when you think about your current operations, if you haven't gone through lighting analysis or lighting retrofits, huge opportunity to reduce energy and save money. Earlier, we talked a little bit about the simple payback and the simple ratio. These are the things that I'm talking about. These are very pragmatic things that organizations can go after. Lastly, is something that organizations commonly don't think about. It's motors. So per the US Department of Energy, dramatic energy and cost savings can be achieved in motor systems by applying best energy management practices and purchasing energy efficient equipment. There's a lot of outdated motors that are not energy efficient that are just draining and causing expense to operations today. So everything that I'm talking about today has to do with resource conservation and cost savings. And those are things that I would highly encourage anyone on this call to seek out from Grainger. If you go to Google and type in Grainger Sustainability Solutions, it'll take you to our brand new landing page that outlines all of this. So Kathleen, I apologize if that was too much of a sales pitch, but it's pragmatic and real, and we're a preferred supplier to both NASCA and NASPO. Thank you.
Thank you. It sounds like there are a lot of kind of slightly smaller changes you can make, agencies can make now to start making some greener, more sustainable choices. So it sounds great. Thanks, Travis. All right. So we're running well on time. So I'm gonna answer some questions from the audience. So this first one, if we could have, it's gonna be for Maurice and Marcus. And I think Maurice, you might have answered this in the chat already, but and this was specifically for EVs, but I think this also applies to green energy, sustainable solutions as a whole. How are states approaching infrastructure needs? It's certainly a concern that we've seen with folks. There's supply chain issues and all that kind of feeds into the infrastructure, and definitely applicable with EVs, but I think it also applies here with green energy and other renewable sources. So Marcus, if you could answer first, that'd be great. Or sorry, Maurice. Yeah.
All right, I'll take.
Sorry,
I
mean to confuse you guys. Thank you.
No worries, Dan. Thank you so much for that question. So 75% of I wanted to clarify that in the chat. I think I answered the panelists and not everyone, but 75% of the state agency's vehicle fleet. So we're not saying that all the vehicles in the state, it's just the state agencies. Our vehicle fleet needs to be 75% battery electric by 2030 and 100 by 2035. Your question around infrastructure, charging stations is kind of what I'm taking that as. And frankly, this is a challenge because there's a school of thought that we're getting vehicles that are now able to drive 300 miles a day, and the number of people through the course of their work that have to drive 300 miles in one day is very small, but it happens on occasion. And that's the part of the change management that I think is so important for people to understand. Is like, you're sacrificing progress in pursuit of perfection, and you're trying to cover 100% of your needs when really the concern or the issue only comes up 1% of the time, and in which case you might be able to find an alternative way to do that work. But 99% of the time you can get by with a nice green, clean electric vehicle that will serve the business needs. So, but when it comes to infrastructure, we are still, that's not to say that we're not pursuing partnerships, and we've got statewide committees and councils with the private sector, with the State Department of Transportation, with our Department of Commerce to try to make the installation of charging stations more prevalent and done by more people, because the state can't take on installing charging stations at a wide scale. We are trying to make some smart investments at state facilities to support the state vehicle fleet, but it's a huge challenge that really, I think people just need to get comfortable with the fact that their EV is going to get them 300 miles in a day, and that'll serve 90% of the need out there. So that is why the change management piece is something that I'm really latching onto as far as what's going to get us over the hump. because I think technology is really close to meeting the need, and it's just a matter of getting people comfortable and learning a new way of doing business that will effectively serve the needs of their customers.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I'll make a plug here for NASCA had a electric vehicle infrastructure webinar last month in January. And that was certainly one of the things that was discussed of, the culture around, state employees of their electric vehicles and what it's like at state facilities. So I appreciate your answer. Thank you, Maurice.
Thanks.
All right, Marcus. So how is your state approaching infrastructure needs? And this can just be, generally for green energy sustainable solutions.
Yeah, so I'll say around some time ago, we as the Department of Administration entered into a contract with our utility to purchase green energy, right? That's where the market around renewables was, and we were trying to push the market and reduce our GHG emissions profile. The market is not there anymore. All of our utilities now have targets for pretty aggressive targets for reducing GHG emissions, and now recently our state legislature just passed a law saying net zero by 2040. So really aggressive targets. So then you've got to ask ourselves, in our context, should we be going out and procuring renewable energy separately? And that's a good strategic question. We do procure a lot of on-site solar. We have an umbrella contract where we have a handful of vendors on there, and our agencies can go and put out, they can just do a design build, which is which is unusual for a state agency, because typically there's a design and then a build. But I'd recommend that the solar industry in particular doesn't work that way. You go to one vendor, as long as it's a relatively straightforward project, and they design and build it, and that's a lower cost way of procuring solar on site. Related to the EVs, I'll say we have our Capitol complex in St. Paul, which there's a picture behind me of it. That's an old steam building behind me, the first building on the Capitol complex, and we have some goat and sheep down there grazing. We have 28 buildings here. We also installed over 70 EV charging ports here, level 2 charging ports for state fleet vehicles and parking customers. We got to our infrastructure limit in our buildings, right? And that was 6 years ago. But now, because level 2 charging equipment for EVs can load balance, we can do more, right? So the technology is moving, but we also know that there is infrastructure upgrades that have to be made. Now, that's a different question when we talk about our heavy duty fleet, right? Like, we care about the whole fleet. Yeah, our light fleet, there's technology solution. We're waiting for the market to bring the vehicles here. They get stuck in Washington all the time. But what do you do about a snow plow and we consume 4.5 million gallons of fuel plowing roads, and we consume 10 million gallons of fuel in our buses, and another 4 million gallons of fuel in our mobility services? What do we do about those? So that's sort of where we lose sleep at night. And that's a much bigger infrastructure question. So.
Yeah, for sure. No, I appreciate that. And, that's a very interesting point about technology having to kind of catch up with us. And, I think that's a big deal with electric vehicles as well. As, the goals are there, but technology is not. So we'll see where that takes us in the next couple of years or so. So I look forward to that. But thank you very much.
Yep.
All right. I think we have one more audience question. So again, thank you everyone for posting these questions. Appreciate it. So when considering sustainability, are the impacts associated with mining the material to make clean energy tech, such as solar panels, turbines, power lines, batteries, etc., being considered? Some of the raw materials are mined in other countries that do not have the environmental standards of the US. Are these factors being considered in the sustainability equation? And I'm going to kick this over to Frederick and Travis to answer this one. Travis, if you want to go first.
Yeah, happy to. Earlier, when we started the conversation, we mentioned the term green, and I said the way we think about it is environmental, social, and economic. It's the triple bottom line, and that's a very good question. So there are laws and regulations, such as the conflict minerals rules, that organizations need to take into consideration when making decisions on how to procure or how to bring in certain raw materials or developing certain products. So good organizations with good ESG or sustainability programs are absolutely taking that into consideration. And I can 100% tell you that from a Grainger product stewardship perspective, we're very mindful of ROS, REACH. These are environmental regulations pertaining to products, but also the social aspects of the conflict minerals rule that I mentioned. So all very important aspects. And while we spend a lot of time talking about environmentally preferred products, the reality is there's a product safety and a product compliance aspect associated with this as well.
Hey. Oh, it's interesting that you brought that up. One of the biggest changes we're seeing is actually happening in Europe. They always think they're always a few years ahead of the US in terms of like environmental policy, et cetera. And one of the things that is being finalized by the European Union Parliament is what's called a carbon border adjustment tax. So basically, what they're saying is that if you bring a product into the country, they're going to be looking at the life cycle emissions associated with that, some of these other environmental issues that you raise. And there's a penalty. You pay basically you would be paying a higher tariff for the fact that you have a higher amount of emissions, et cetera, as a part of that whole life cycle production process. And so it really puts those firms at a competitive disadvantage. So how does that impact the US? Well, if you're a US manufacturer selling these products and you're looking to enter the European Union market, it's something you need to consider. So you tend to see this trickle-out effect from things that are happening elsewhere in the world. You would think, well, we're an island, but well, we're not when it comes to economics, right? And so if the US is a big market that's really attractive to a lot of large US companies, you'll see some modifications made. And right now, I can tell you there's a lot of focus on this by a lot of big manufacturers. How do they prepare for this? So the points that were raised about conflict minerals, et cetera, those are all things people are really thinking about. I can tell you that we, as a firm, a lot of oil and gas majors are now really thinking about carbon sequestration, et cetera. They're really thinking about what are the big investments they need to make to try and reduce the amount of emissions associated with, even with their own fossil fuel production, because it's something that's worrying, I think, all of industry. And we're starting to see some reaction to that.
All right. Thank you both. I really appreciate that answer. All right. So we have one last question to close us out. We have about a couple minutes left. Going to have each of our panelists come back and answer kind of what are your key takeaways. So, if folks are just joining in now, what is one thing that you want our audience to take away from this conversation around green energy? All right. Travis, we're gonna take it over to you.
Yeah, so one key takeaway for sure is, this is the wild, wild west. This is a very much a moving target in the space of sustainability. You've got the Global Reporting Initiative and the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board still trying to merge and develop, new guidelines for this particular space. The governance still isn't figured out. Bottom line, work with your supply chain, work with organizations like Grainger, like with some of the thought leaders that are on this panel to help you get better in this particular space. So my suggestion is to put us to work on your behalf. And I think it was either Frederick or Marcus earlier, and it was be bold. Be very bold in this particular space. And Frederick said something too, and it was making sure that your capital plan matches your long-term strategic objectives in sustainability. That is so true. I know it's probably easy for everyone to understand, but you'd be amazed on how that doesn't happen in organizations. We see it all the time. So thank you very much, Kathleen.
Yeah, no, I thank you. I really appreciate that. All right, Marcus, what is your one key takeaway?
Yeah, I think everyone here is a lot smarter than me. That's one of them. But I think that we're just in a very transformational time, and now is the time, if there's any time, to just jump in feet first. There's a lot of easy wins. Energy efficiency is a big one, right? There are cost neutral strategies around procurement. Even with electric vehicles, it's really a cost neutral strategy. But wherever you start, and whichever reporting framework you choose to use, if you do, track make sure the denominator is right. So if you're out there saying, well, great, we did 3 energy efficiency projects and saved X amount of energy. Well, that's great, but how much energy in total do you use? And that's really difficult to get your arms around. And I'll just say, for us, it's huge. We've got 3,500 buildings, 12,000 vehicles. Like, it's a difficult task, and you don't need to know super granular detail, but you need to know enough to have a reasonable strategy. So, because everyone has limited resources and you've got to tackle what actually matters. So
I like that, tackling what actually matters. I mean, I think that's crucial now too for state governments with, folks are experiencing limited staffing too. So tackling what matters. I like that. Thank you. All right. And Maurice, close us out here.
All right. Yeah, this is a good question. I really like this one just because, when it comes to, really moving the needle on sustainability for, our country or the world, state and local governments can't do this alone. That's my golden nugget. And it's going to take partnerships and aligned strategies between public and private sector to have greater impacts to reduce our carbon emissions. We need energy projects, and the private sector needs to make these things cost effective so that we can justify the transition from current practices to more sustainable ways of doing business. And this isn't just for public agencies, this is for private citizens as well. The cost for electric vehicles, solar panels need to continue to come down. Operationally, we need EV charging stations more readily available. We need energy efficient building systems and new technologies to be more cost effective. So it literally becomes a no-brainer to choose options that reduce our carbon emissions. There is one more thing, that I think is really great in Washington State. We have this Green Direct program, public-private partnership with the Puget Sound Energy. And effectively what it is it's a commitment from different organizations to invest in or to purchase green, sustainable energy, which gives Puget Sound Energy the opportunity to invest in solar panel farms or wind farms to create that renewable energy. So there's these really interesting partnerships that somehow give financing leverage to private entities to do good things. And I think looking for those opportunities is something that I'm going to keep an eye out, and I think we all should as well.
Great. All right. Appreciate that. And Fred, I want to make sure I didn't miss you.
All right, thanks. Well, okay, last comment. I would say that, based on some of the comments I heard this afternoon about EVs, et cetera, I have found that, it's my opinion, that electrification will change the world. And whether it's EVs, building, heating or cooling, there's a big push towards electrification, and you're starting to see lots of state legislatures and cities. Everyone's sort of like, yeah, let's electrify. Let's get rid of those fossil fuel, sources of heating in the buildings. And to me, I see that as actually the biggest threat right now to sustainability, because it's overlooking some key issues. And I want to make sure folks are focused on that, especially around some of the knock-on effects. So we think about building envelopes, like heat exchangers, some of the grid side investments that we need to be made by the utility for like substation upgrades, like transmission lines. No, even in the infrastructure bill and the IRA, there was not agreement on what to do about transmission lines. Nobody likes transmission lines. And it's a key to this whole thing working, right? And I think sometimes it's difficult to write legislation when folks don't really understand like the biggest weak point, right? It's a big 800-pound gorilla in the room that no one's looking at. I would like to see, as governmental entities, more coordination with legislators so they really understand some of the issues. And I find that because some of these requirements are being placed on yourselves and your building portfolio, you're the perfect entities to be having these conversations with legislators, so that we're not just making investments in sort of like a shiny new object, but really the underlying infrastructure that supports it all. That, to me, that's going to be key to really succeeding in meeting some of these aggressive sustainability targets.
That's great. Thank you very much. All right. I would like to thank all of our panelists today. This was a wonderful conversation. I really appreciate all of your time. Marcus, Maurice, Fred, and Travis. I really appreciate all the work that you've put into building up to this conversation today. So Thank you very much for your time and your insights. I hope everyone will join us for our next NASCA TV webinar on March 15th. Topic is risk management. Please save March 15th at 3 p.m. Eastern time in your calendar. All right. Thank you very much, everyone, for being here with us today. As a reminder, the recording will be up on NASCA's Knowledge Center in the next few days. Please share this with your team members as well. Again, thank you to our panelists, and thank you all for being with us today. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you very much.